Hi, this is Casey and Ren, and Ren's painting a really badass Godzilla figure, so he's going to be a little bit quiet this episode because he's concentrating.
No, I'm not going to be quiet. I'm definitely going to.
I didn't say you were going to be silent. I said you were going to be quieter-ish.
Oh.
Anyways, all extra film here. We're talking about the controversial last episode ending of Game of Thrones, which I felt kind of compelled to talk about. The Sansa
I believe the
scene.
title of the episode was
Unbowed, Unbent, and Unbroken.
Okay.
That's what it was. Yeah. Spoilers. So, yeah,
Yeah.
spoilers.
It's Game of Thrones. Like, if you're not caught up, like...
Don't listen to anything about it. Like, just don't do that.
Yeah. Unless you like spoilers, then totally listen to us.
Yeah. Anyway.
And judge something based off of not watching it.
Well, I felt a little bit compelled to talk about this last scene where after Ramsay and Sansa get married, he proceeds to take her in an unloving fashion in front of Theon. I'll put it that way. There's been a lot of controversy about this, and mostly the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because I feel like viewers sometimes have a disconnect between sort of thinking that if something is said or presented on screen, the viewer is supposed to like it. If that makes any sense. Like, my go-to example is Chasing Amy. People who hate that movie because a character in it says that all lesbians need is a good dicking, and it's like, but the stupid character said that. Like,
Yeah,
you're
totally.
not supposed to agree with that. Yeah. I think that's kind of what's happening in the scene with all this controversy about it, is that people saw it and were disgusted and uncomfortable, so therefore it's wrong to show it. And,
Yeah. Well, one of the arguments that I heard was pretty much everything that Game of Thrones shows is within a fantasy context. So, like, you're not going to see, well, at least they say, you're not going to see somebody's eyes get gouged out. You're not going to see somebody get stabbed in the fucking pregnant belly. You're not going to see a dude get his dick cut off. You're not going to see guys get eaten by dragons.
not in modern-day first-world countries.
Well,
Let's specify, because that's really what they have in mind.
Yeah.
Not like this stuff doesn't happen in other parts of the world.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, exactly. And there is something to be said of, you know, there's a lot of argument that showing rape, which is common, is a bad thing. But since it's presented to be terrible, I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of times in many contexts where rape is shown as titillating.
Exactly, and in this scene, it was very gross and not sexualized, or not sexualized, but not fetishized.
And also, this is like the first straight up rape, though. And, like, even that's... It's rape, but, like, it's not brutally shown. Like, out of what you physically see in the show, it is not shown.
Right. And there's also been some stuff of like, oh, well, you made it all about Theon by having his face be shown at the end. But you see Sansa's face, and then you see Theon's face.
Well, I think part of the reason is like maybe people haven't been watching like cable shows and stuff like that, because I've seen much more brutal rape. Like The Sopranos had a scene that literally made my jaw drop.
No, here's the thing too. Not cable shows. I saw a more brutal rape than this on Private Practice, which is a network television show. Like, that's public access.
Yeah, apparently there was a rape.
Actually, since you're watching Buffy now, Xander was a rapist, which was really uncomfortable. And I know, right? I know, right? It was like all sorts of gross and horrible. But my point is that was public access, and it was much more, you know, brutal and in your face and really uncomfortable and traumatizing to me personally. I was really upset by that scene. And here's the thing, if you're traumatized by this scene, there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't like this scene, that's fine, but you're not... I don't think there was any point where producers were like, oh yeah, you're supposed to like this scene. So I don't see what the issue of taking rape and making it brutal and uncomfortable and hard to watch, why that's an issue. Like, why taking it seriously as a problem is a problem.
Well, it's not... Honestly, I don't think it's that the show didn't take it seriously. I think people are saying that, like, it shouldn't be done.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's just, like, what...
Well, it's because people...
That makes no sense to me. I don't understand.
Because, you know, in many people's viewpoint, rape is the worst thing that can happen to somebody. I would argue that killing somebody is worse, but, you know, I'll take rape. Whatever. You want to say that's the worst thing ever?
Everybody can agree it's terrible.
Yeah, it's fucking terrible.
It's really
like,
bad. We don't have to compare it. Like, we don't have to compare rape to murder. They're both terrible, terrible things that shouldn't happen to people. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah.
But, like you were saying.
Well, I think that, you know, I think that Game of Thrones portrays a very harsh world. And, like, to say that somehow this world has limits would be limiting to the show. Not to mention, like, I mean, I watch cable dramas all the time. Game of Thrones has been really tame. Like, FX had a very brutal rape in the second season.
Right.
For Sons of Anarchy.
Oh, okay.
Well,
HBO has done rape too. The rape scene in True Detectives. Or maybe not rape scene, but subtext. It wasn't shown. It wasn't shown nearly as much, or like as visually as this scene. I'll say that. So, okay, maybe that wasn't a good example.
I think that scene was a little bit more complicated than this scene.
Yeah, I agree. That was a bad example, my bad.
Yeah, that was kind of a straw dogsy situation, which, yeah.
No, that's fine. But the other thing that I've been hearing is, just, why are you taking this consensual sex scenes from the book and making them rapey? Because this scene is being compared to Khal Drogo and Daenerys' first time together, and the Jaime Cersei fucking beneath their dead kid scene from last season. And you can say what you want about those, but if your argument is that you're taking scenes from the book and making it more brutal when it shouldn't be, they significantly changed and downplayed the brutality of this scene compared to this scene in the book. Which was not Sansa. Oh, good God, yeah. Yeah, to be fair, it wasn't Sansa in the book who gets married to Ramsay. Another character is, but there is physical torture before sex. Theon is actively involved in really molesting this girl. She did actually try to escape and leave her situation, which Sansa never did in the whole season. Yeah, she's been going through with this idea of marrying Ramsay. You can't
really do that, you know, in the context of the show, because Theon got his dick cut off. What's he gonna fucking rape?
Well, right. No, I know, but my point is that it is much more brutal. Well, there is more of a background behind it to give context to it being rape. Yeah. She was also somewhere between the ages of 9 and 11.
Oh, I forgot. Did we give a trigger warning to this episode?
Well, spoilers, and we're talking about a rape scene. I don't know. We'll put it in the title. How about that? Or in the description. Yeah. Okay. So, if you want to say, compared to the other two scenes, where you took a consensual sex scene and you made it, at best, ambiguous, at worst, you made it rape, depending on people's definition, and I don't really want to go too much into that because that's a different argument. They did take this very, very brutal, harsh, violent scene where they had this character who was pretty much only a victim. She has no agency of her own, and she is a child, an actual child, not even pubescent yet.
And let's also...
And, like, all she is at this point of the story, not always, but in this point of the story, she's only a victim. And you tone down all the brutality, but you still had the essence of the scene. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't understand how I'm not going to say I don't understand how they could have made it better, because of course you can always improve. But I'm saying they made very strong decisions to go against the scene in the book to make it less harsh.
Well, and they also, although some people will argue the context of the scene and interpret it in different ways, often, mostly because, like, if you can stand to watch the scene again, much of it is shown off camera. So what you're interpreting is literally coming from your imagination versus what is physically shown in the show. Pretty much all you see, literally, physically, all you see is the back of Sansa's shirt get ripped and then her place her head down. That is all you see.
No, okay.
You place...
If you want to put everything in order, okay. She's hesitant to get undressed. In my opinion, it's mostly because she's uncomfortable around Theon, but okay, so she doesn't want to do it in front of Theon or at all or whatever. She's slowly getting undressed. Ramsay is impatient. He rips her dress open. Her head goes down on the bed, and you can see that she is uncomfortable.
Yeah,
you can hear more of her clothes being ripped, presumably things like her tights or her skirt or whatever. Okay. You can hear his belt unbuckle. Well, you can hear his belt unbuckle and his pants fall down.
Okay.
And then you pan from her face, or you cut from her face to Theon's face. You hear that she is not comfortable and that this is painful for her. I wouldn't say she's screaming and wailing. And I'm not saying she needs to be screaming and wailing for it to be considered rape. I'm just saying that really, if you just look at what it is, she's uncomfortable.
It's very hard in the context to see if it is... It's very hard within the context to understand how brutal it is actually to her because you're not seeing it.
Right. But you don't...
Which,
but
obviously for taste...
But for instance, you don't hear him hit her or something like that.
Right.
You don't see it, you don't hear it. It's just a very uncomfortable first-time experience. And I'm not saying that makes it rape or not rape.
Yeah.
That's not quite my point. Because it doesn't have to be rape for it to be uncomfortable. And it doesn't have to be rape for it to qualify as something that should make you feel bad about it, but it also is not like, oh, it's not terrible if it's not rape, so I'm not going to say that one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, what happened to her was terrible. That's not what we're, I mean,
but
that's not
what But in the context of this season,
yeah,
this whole season, she's turned down every opportunity to escape on purpose. She was initially disgusted by this... No, because, like, somebody's gonna listen to us and say, I'm just saying, hey, we're blaming the victim. No, I'm not blaming the victim. It's not like that. I'm just saying, she was obviously not happy with this situation. It was not good. This was not in her control. Definitely. I'll say that much for sure. But a lot of things come down to personal context, like, personal interpretation and context.
Yeah.
And what I get from the context is that when Sansa has decided, outside of Littlefinger's idea that, hey, you should marry Ramsay, that she is going to marry Ramsay, that she's not going to escape, that when she talks to Miranda and says that she is going to, take Ramsay and become his wife, and she doesn't say this, agency. But, she made a choice to go through with this, and I think she has another plan in mind. I personally think that she was uncomfortable being in front of Theon, and she didn't really want to have sex with Ramsay, but I think it's a hard choice she's making with a different end goal in mind, and I'm not saying that makes it not rape or not her fault or whatever.
I definitely think that there's an ulterior motive that's going on in her head, that she is essentially bearing with it for another circumstance, which...
That's what I feel as well, yeah.
Which is not to say that what she is experiencing is not bad.
Exactly.
And also, what many women have had to experience, and still have to experience, unfortunately, given the fact that when in many countries and legal circumstances and anything, people actually believe that a married woman can't get raped, which is bullshit. Mm-hmm. But that is a mentality that some people have. And this show addressed it. Exactly, yeah. Which I actually commend the show because everybody's talking about it.
Exactly, and it's a really interesting... It was bringing to light a difficult issue to talk about is more of what I think. And when it comes down to just producers making the decision to include this... Yeah. I don't know how you were going to have a sex scene between Sansa and Ramsay and have it be fun or happy or loving in any way. Like, that's just not going to happen, period.
And what, does that mean that because some people are going to be uncomfortable, then you just not have sex, period?
Well, but that's the thing, though, is that
we already have cut down on the nudity, and there's no nudity in the scene.
Exactly, no nudity.
Okay, so, like, that's one thing. We've cut down on nudity this season, too.
Right.
Significantly.
But, yeah, I think we've only seen prostitutes naked, and I think that's it. No, we saw Miranda naked.
Oh, yeah.
But there's not a lot of nudity, you're right. But my main point, and the whole thing I just wanted to talk about is just because it's on the show does not mean that somebody behind the scenes is like, oh, let's include a rape scene just because it'll be titillating, or let's include a rape scene because it'll be hot, or let's include a rape scene just because of this. Like, I don't know anybody that saw that scene and wasn't, horrified and disgusted and grossed out and just deeply, deeply uncomfortable. In that sense, I feel that scene did its job well. It made rape very, very upsetting, as it should be. But I don't see a problem with if you were going to portray rape in a scene.
Well,
you give it seriousness and gravity.
I also think another big thing is Game of Thrones is a show that people who normally don't watch certain types of TV shows are watching Game of Thrones, which means that, like, certain things might surprise them, in Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is more accessible, but here's the thing, like,
Game of Thrones isn't very accessible, too. That's the other thing, is that you have to pay money to HBO to at least legally watch the show. Right. You have to pay money to have cable and to have access to very, rated R or NC-17 or whatever style material. You pay money, and knowing that is the content you're getting.
And I'm sorry, I have to bring this up. Mm-hmm. One of HBO's first TV shows that they ever did was a show called Oz. Oh! Which took place in prison.
Yeah, that show.
Which had lots of male-on-male rape. Mm-hmm. Which, my question, and I'm really curious about this, and I'm sure I'm going to get an uproar of people in comments and stuff like that, but the question is if this happened to a man, would any of this have exploded as it did?
Like, you mean, just say you took exactly the same situation, but Sansa happened to be a dude. More or less.
Or if it happened to Theon.
Oh, yeah, like if Ramsay had raped Theon and Sansa was watching or something like that.
Yeah.
That could happen, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, so please comment below and let us know what you think of that, for sure.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's just, I feel like... I'm not saying anybody's wrong for being upset by the scene.
No.
Because I was upset by this scene. Really. But being upset doesn't mean that it's wrong to include.
Well, that's where I'm coming from. And also, artists... Like, the thing about art is, like, art doesn't have to be what you want it to be. Like, art is supposed to be challenging.
Exactly. This was a very challenging scene, and it's not like... this is some utopia where everything is awesome and everything you see is what it's supposed to be like. No, this is a harsh reality where everything you see is supposed to be terrible. Very little on Game of Thrones is happy.
We've dealt with Joffrey. And Joffrey. We've dealt with Joffrey and all the shit he did.
To sexually molest and kill and torture prostitutes, which... let's face it, is a prevalent real life issue. Let's put that out there.
Yeah, it is.
Sex
workers have it really hard.
Sex workers and trans people especially.
Yeah, trans people
things like
as well.
that really are prevalent in those two communities. So, I mean, let's just put it out there. That's more of a real life thing than having your eyes squished. You even just want to talk about Ramsay, him hunting down women like deer in the forest. There was a real serial killer who did that.
Yeah.
He would capture women and release them and kill them. They
Well,
were like he would hunt them like they were animals.
Well, and also,
But that wasn't too far. I'm sorry.
Well, and also, Ramsay in the video game, there's like a king coming to power, and Ramses just stabs the dude in the throat.
Right.
I forget if it's the throat, but he does stab him, and then he's a horrible human being. There's no doubt I would actually say that Ramses is worse than Joffrey.
Oh, I agree. I definitely agree. And it's
maybe it took this episode for everybody else to think that.
Right.
But this is no way out of his character. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised.
This is the nicest we've seen him act towards anybody, and I'm not saying it was nice.
Oh, no.
At all. But I'm just saying on the scale of Ramsay from fucked up to, oh my god, atrocious.
No, his sex with Miranda was very equal.
What we saw.
There
was some subtextual stuff that makes
there was an S&M vibe to it, but they definitely were both into it.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, my point is just that I feel that the actions in the scene were wrong, but that it wasn't wrong of the creators of the show to include this.
No, and
there's definitely a difference.
Right, and if this bothers you, don't watch the show.
If this bothers you too much to want to watch it, that's your own decision, and just don't watch it. But if this bothers you because you don't agree with these actions, that kind of means that you have a really good moral compass.
Yeah, exactly. If this bothers you because you think it's wrong, then you are a regular fucking human being.
Right.
I mean,
with societally, socially acceptable moral standards.
I think some people are worried that some people might watch this and find it titillating, which, yes, unfortunately there are fucked up people like that. That does exist. There are fucked up people who, no matter the context, will watch something and get a different interpretation watching it. So I think they're worried about that. Mm-hmm. I definitely don't think that this is the worst example. There are much more fucked up things in the pornography industry.
Right, but I'm not going to say let's compare rape scenes and discuss which one's worse based on the merits of this and this. Really, let's face it, rape is bad.
Yep.
It's just understatement of the day, but
Yeah, but this isn't a prime example of the worst example.
Exactly, and if people, because I know people were upset that they took a scene where Jaime and Cersei were by Joffrey's dead body, and apparently in the book she said something that she was indicating.
Yeah, she said, "Take me here
consent.
Take me here right now."
She was creating enthusiastic consent to having sex next to her dead son. Which, I'm sorry, whether it's consensual or not, that scene is still messed up either way.
Yeah.
If you make it non-consensual, of course, it's more messed up. But if you want to debate the merits of that scene and taking a scene that's consensual and making it rape, that makes sense. But that's not applicable for this scene.
Yeah, well, I mean, some people are like, well, don't have either. But
unless somehow Ramsay was just murdered before the scene could happen. I don't know how the scene could happen without it being upsetting and uncomfortable.
I think...
It should be.
I would be very surprised if this scene isn't paid off somehow.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is I think there is definitely a very loud uproar way too soon, because this is literally the last scene of Game of Thrones that's been released and nobody knows where
he could be killed.
going.
He could be killed in the next minute of
I've heard,
the next season, which probably won't happen. But.
Right, but I mean, like, a friend of mine said, like, oh, well, I assume that what's going to happen is that, like, the other two scenes, the scene with Daenerys and Drogo and the scene with Cersei and Jaime, that this scene is just going to be thrown away and it's not going to contribute to the story. I personally don't think that, but we don't know yet. We just don't know.
Also, the fact that they ended the episode on it definitely gives it more weight.
Exactly, because, like you said, everybody's talking about it all week. Because it's upsetting. But I think that this is going to be a major plot point in the season. I think this is where Sansa's story arc has been leading to, and I think this is going to sort of be a really big moment for her and her storyline. I think that this is something that's going to be carried out at least through the rest of the season, but I think, considering Game of Thrones, it might be actually important for a lot longer. Me personally, but we don't know yet. We've literally seen nothing else and have no idea what will happen next. Especially since we really can't follow the books on this. Mm-hmm. And if they are following the books, please, for the love of God, don't include the thing with the dog. Please, like, that will be too much. Personally.
Right. Can you please tell me what happened? Because I don't know the thing with the dog. Or do you not want to discuss it?
In the book, the character who is married to Ramsay and is very specifically raped by him, there's a point where she mentions that she has she says that stuff happened with his dog, that she'll do anything for Ramsay and he can have his way with her, or he can have the dog with her. Like, she says, it's not super specific, but it's upsetting anyway. If you include that in the TV show, like, that is too far for my personal taste. Personally, but that's me. I'm not cool with that. It's very MW, because I know you've read that. But, ooh. Anyways, let's not talk about them anymore.
So I do want to say, there was an article written by The Guardian, which had George R. R. Martin speak out on the scene. And Martin said to the New York Times that although his books are based on epic fantasy, they are based on history. This series is loosely inspired by the War of the Roses, and rape and sexual violence have been a part of every war ever fought, from the ancient Sumerians to present day. To omit from a narrative centered on war and power would have been fundamentally false and dishonest, and would have undermined one of the themes of the books, that the true horrors of human history derive not from the orcs and dark lords, but from ourselves. We are the monsters, and the heroes too. Each of us has within himself the capacity for great good and great evil.
Right, and I think that's what this scene was supposed to be. It was supposed to be heart-wrenching and bad. Yeah. To say the least. Although, to play devil's advocate to what he's saying here, Vice did release an article as well that was talking about the historical context of rape in the Middle Ages, and that rape is actually punishable by exile and death. Yeah. It's not like rape was just kind of tossed off. There was a major thing about you need consent back then too. But to also be fair, that and something that has to be brought up is that marital rape was not seen as a thing. Well, that's very true. That is true as well. And the other thing is that whether you want to talk about whether it's legal or not, or whether it's socially appropriate or not, it has been consistent. Well, it's fucking wrong. Well, it's wrong, but it's also been part of human history all over the world in every culture for history. To not talk about something like that difficult, like a big issue that affects so many people in a very serious way, which I believe they're doing. I don't think this scene is going to go by the wayside. Well, and it definitely is one of those things where it's like, okay, if you're going to talk about the horrors that human beings can commit and have no holds bar, which is essentially what the show is. Right, exactly. Then not to show this would be holding bars back. Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I just think the general consensus is that everybody who was making this scene happen understood that what was happening was terrible, and we're trying to translate the fact that that was a terrible thing to happen to audiences, which they obviously got. I just don't understand why people are saying it shouldn't be included.
But what some people really want, it seems like, is censorship. Like it's...
No, you said the C word. Mm.
Do you not show it?
It was supposed to be a joke. It was a joke.
Yeah. Do you not show it?
Which they didn't. They included it, but they didn't visually show anything.
Yes, which rape in television has been done on public access television shows. Mm-hmm. Probably the most notable, I was told, was actually done in a comedy TV show, which was not a comedy scene, but it was in the show called All in the Family, which happened...
Oh, yes.
Which is a lot more horrific than this scene, which is not to discredit this scene.
Right,
but
it's just... There's a history of the issue of rape being talked about, and I think that's what this scene is it's bringing it up in a difficult to talk about way, but in
and the very fact that we're bringing it up,
way.
We are talking about a taboo topic. Yes, rape is a taboo topic. Mm-hmm. People don't want to talk about it. They don't want... The reason why they don't want to talk about it is because it makes everybody uncomfortable. And it should.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Especially in this context, when we have cases like Steubenville and the Steubenville rape case,
I know.
And it's very good to bring this episode up because just because a woman doesn't say no doesn't mean that it's not rape, which it's but to men growing up with this constantly being thrown out, like, a woman consents, she says yes or no. If you throw it into another category, people have to fucking know that. I mean, I know
true.
Understanding body language might be simple to a lot of people.
No, but
and,
here's the thing.
Understanding uncomfortability and all that kind of stuff. But when you constantly say no means no, then this falls into a different category, and we need to talk about it because people need to know that there are other circumstances that count as rape that are not, the difference between saying yes
and not saying no.
Right,
and I heard testimony from a witness of the Steubenville rape case that the reason why he said that he didn't do anything about it when he saw what was happening was because it didn't look wrong to him, because what he pictured rape as was screaming, crying, thrashing around, saying no, 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 stop, don't.
Yeah.
Which obviously, since this poor girl was intoxicated and unconscious.
Yeah, and she...
Unconscious.
And one of the other things possible. That, when I brought this up, in some forums that I was talking to, people are like, but there are plenty of cases where a chick says no, and she's intoxicated and all this kind of stuff. But Sansa was not intoxicated. Right. She was fully awake. It's still rape, but it definitely falls into this gray zone legally. Like, if this were a legal case, it would fall into this gray zone legally because, like, she didn't protest and all that kind of stuff. But, the circumstances and stuff, if she ran or anything like that, it would still happen. But this needs to be brought up. Like, people do need to know that this is still wrong, even though everything, I mean, this is the biggest problem of not having sex ed.
Right.
Because how the fuck are... Okay, I understand that, like, most people understand that sexual consent, is more than just saying yes or no. But when that's all you teach people, you're going to have people that, like, there are people in the world that, possibly, I mean, you're always going to have sick fucks in the world. Yeah. But you're going to also have people that, like, don't understand that there are circumstances where a woman is unable to give consent even when she's sober. You know, like this falls into a category that we need to talk about.
Right. I know one thing that's being taught right now, it's a very new concept, but it's not no or lack of no, but it's enthusiastic consent.
Okay.
Where you really should be having sex when your partner and you are both saying, yes, let's have sex, that's awesome, essentially. It's very difficult to actually make that happen in real life in every single sexual encounter ever.
I mean,
but
plus let's face it. There are some people that like even their most enthusiastic is just like woo, you know. Which and you know if you're just not doing it right, she's not going to be like enthusiastic about it, and she's not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, people bad sexual encounters when it's not rape.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very different thing, and it doesn't mean like just because.
Yeah, and sometimes
it's not to discredit anyone.
I mean, you could hurt somebody unintentionally by doing something that like you just didn't know.
Sex and rape are just such gray zones. There's no very clear.
No, there's some pretty.
No. I'm saying like there's a whole spectrum. There are definitely situations where it's like you can very clearly say that is absolutely rape. There are situations where you can very clearly say that is absolutely not rape and totally happy and consensual. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, if two people are intoxicated, and then the woman regrets it afterwards, like, apparently now that is considered rape. You know, legally, I can't really argue with that. Part of me thinks, but, you know, whatever. Let's just call it rape so that people don't get angry. Go ahead.
That's just one of those things where I'm going to be like, that is your opinion, and you can totally say whatever you want to say, but as your co-host, I'm going to disagree.
Okay.
Which is cool.
What part?
Rape is one of those things where it's, hear me out. One of the reasons why it's very difficult to talk about is that, in general, it is a situation that happens between two people, and it comes down to so-and-so's word over so-and-so's word. It comes from their own personal experience, and it's just very difficult to judge outside of that situation when you were not there and you don't know whether it was rape or not rape.
Yeah.
That's just one of those things where I'm personally going to say I am not qualified to say one way or another.
Yeah, because thank God we're not witnessing this.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I'm
I
not going to say something qualifies as rape and something does not.
Okay, I spoke a little soon on that, and in case you miss that, no, I spoke a little soon. Obviously, we don't know the circumstances that might put that, but if the circumstance is between you and somebody else who's intoxicated, don't fucking do it because, it's going to be one person's word over the other, and why would you even take the risk?
Well, I mean, you can always say,
either
it's
way.
smarter to not do this, and it's smarter
but
to
obviously
do this, but it comes down to people.
Obviously, no, I'm not blaming the victim.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't think that you were, but it's good to
it's hard because, while saying this, if you don't cover your bases, it's like, well, okay, I didn't say it this way, so somebody's going to interpret it as, oh, I'm victim blaming, which, it...
But to bring this back to the show, we're having this discussion, not just you and me, but people all over the internet and in person are talking about a very serious, difficult issue because of a scene on television. Would it really be better to just hide that all under the mat, to sweep it all away, and just have not had that scene happen?
Well,
I mean, I don't know how that storyline would have played out without that scene.
I disagree because I think it is very healthy and very important for us to have this scene to talk about.
Exactly, because it's a fantasy scene between made-up characters.
Nobody within the context of the show was hurt.
But we are talking about actual harm, but we have a very safe model with which to talk about it.
Yes.
And unlike things, and I'm not saying it is wrong to talk about real life rape cases, but it's more comfortable. Let's face it, it's a little bit more comfortable to talk about the rape of Sansa by Ramsay than to talk about the Steubenville rape cases when it's real people.
Yeah.
A lot of real people involved in that. Like it's really difficult to talk about a real situation. So
the reason why I brought that up is because that is an example of a case where I honestly think that some of the people, they knew they were doing something wrong. They didn't know the word for what they were doing.
No, I'm not saying it was wrong for us to talk about it. I'm just saying
it's a real
fictional model to talk about maybe makes it a better vehicle for people who have much more difficult time talking about it.
Yeah, and this is a difficult subject. There's no way around it. This is a difficult subject. Even bringing it up is a red flag.
Right, just the word by itself, which, I mean, let's face it, if people are out in public, they're not going to say it at the same volume as they say every other word in the English language. Or, not every, but, a lot of other words.
Unless they're fucking teenagers and they just say it when somebody tickles them.
Right.
That happens.
But, it is social taboo subject, but...
But it happens so fucking prevalent. I mean,
exactly.
It happens
exactly
all the
people
fucking
are
time.
Talking about too is the prevalence of this issue.
Yeah, if it's
kind of,
it's one of those things that if it happens so often in our culture, why? And if it's horrible, why is it somehow taboo to talk about it? Especially like in
fiction. You're talking
in
about
a fiction or like if it is something that happens to a majority of people who experience violence, either experience either experience physical violence or they experience sexual violence. Mm-hmm. Sometimes both. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think definitely a big backlash to the scene was that people are worried that this scene is not going to be taken seriously. I personally think that it will be because it's been built up so much beforehand by a lot of events happening in the show. And like you said, it was the last scene in the episode, and there's a lot of attention around it.
I will say that I can see one perspective of it is that Sansa turning down all this kind of stuff must mean that she's asking for it, which I am not saying. Right. I am not saying, but I am basing that interpretation off of what I think some people are contextualizing this as.
Okay.
Within the context of the scene, my interpretation of it, the first time I watched it, was she was uncomfortable with Theon. She was uncomfortable with Theon, a person she thought killed her two brothers. She does not know that it was a couple farm boys, which... I mean, it's still fucked up, but it wasn't her brothers. Yeah. So, and we as viewers obviously know that Theon didn't kill.
And also,
so sometimes we might forget that within the context of the scene, so we see it all about Ramsay and her, but we forget the context of the Theon Greyjoy, not just watching, but also the person who was responsible for taking down Winterfell and...
Right.
Even though he had very little...
Right, part of that too is not only does she think that he killed her brothers, but also that's her childhood, adopted brother, someone she trusted and who betrayed her.
Yeah.
Especially. So, I'm sorry, keep going.
So yeah, I mean, like, continuing on, like, my interpretation of the scene was that, the first time I watched it, the other times I can understand how other people interpreted it. Please don't get on me. I interpreted the scene differently. But I viewed it as she was taking off her clothes, getting ready to consent. And then, when Ramsay said, no, Theon, you stay here, That's when she was like, hey, this is fucked up. And then she still continued to take off her clothes, but she was like really uncomfortable with it. Mm-hmm. And then the sex happened. Given the context of that thing, it is not brutal like how I normally see something in a TV show context. Like it's like I've watched Spartacus, I've watched Sons of Anarchy. Like I've seen rape done in ways that are much more horrifying and stuff like that. Which is not to say that this isn't horrifying. Mm-hmm. I am not condoning it. Sorry, I have to say that a billion fucking times.
Can I ask you, when you did first watch the scene, how did it make you feel?
It made me feel uncomfortable as fuck. Yeah. Like it's not
like you were watching this scene and like, oh well that happened, or like, oh well that was a good thing, or oh she deserved it. Even
though I when initially watching it, I did not see the scene as rape. I saw it as, uncomfortability on top of virginal pains, which she was bearing but not fighting. I now see that this uncomfortability and all this kind of stuff, yes, that can be interpreted as rape, but it's not based on it's not similar to the context that I understand, that I've seen it portrayed. This is this is in a little bit of a grayer zone than black and white, slam down,
right.
forcefully. Yeah, this is a lot more complicated.
That's something I like. I appreciate when rape is talked about not in those terms.
Yeah, because it's
it
too
talks
simple.
about the black and white. Exactly.
Yeah, it's too simple when you just when rape is just like, oh, the chick got slammed down, which is horrible.
Of course, it's always horrible, but like I said, it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
It's more important. I feel it's more important to talk about bits in the middle where it's more difficult to discern, so you know that happens.
Yeah.
One of my favorite is hard to say. Maybe let's say a powerful scene for me was actually was a storyline on the show Felicity, which make fun of me this time. It's not like my favorite show or anything, but there's a storyline where you don't see the sex happen, but a female character is raped by her boyfriend, and it's really upsetting because they were both in love with each other, and the boyfriend did not feel that he had raped her, and the girlfriend was upset by this, and she was trying to figure out, is this rape, is this not rape? I don't know, I don't understand. And it was all about, and here's the thing, the boyfriend was very, oh cool, we had sex, whatever, and then once they start discussing it with him, and he's like, wait, it was rape? What? Which this sounds maybe like it's a rape apologist storyline, but I liked it because, or I could appreciate it because it was really delving into the fact that rape is not always very easy to discern. It's not always this cartoon mustache twirling dude is gonna throw you down, and no matter how much you say no and stop, he's gonna be violent and aggressive and have his way with you and leave you crying and sobbing. Right. It's not always that situation.
Well, and also one thing that has to be brought up is there was a time where people would use any consensual sex with somebody of a person of color, and that would automatically be turned into a rape case.
Well, there's also consensual sex with minors is statutory rape.
Right. Yeah. And
there are times when minors are raped and it's not consensual and it's not statutory.
Within the context of the show, I am unclear of Sansa's age. So
she's supposed to be 16 on the show at this point.
Okay, that's fucked up. The actress is 18, so
she's 19.
She's 19. Okay, so the actress is 19, so I mean that muddies the water a little bit because
she's publicly said that she was okay filming the scene and she wasn't uncomfortable.
Yeah.
She's publicly said that filming this scene, she was not upset at the idea of filming the scene when she read the script or when she was filming. So they did not put the actress in any position of being uncomfortable or in pain or anything like that. Which I think was pretty obvious by the way they filmed it, but it was good that she came out and said that she was very willing to do this scene. You know, no actors were taken advantage of or anything.
Yeah.
It's important to talk about that kind of stuff, too.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a good thing that we're talking about it, because this is, to not talk about it is worse. To me, not talking about it is worse, because to say something that is something that people experience in a massive way, and somehow say that, like, you know, this horrible experience that you had, you have to keep that inside. You have to not talk about it. You know, this subject is off limits.
Mm-hmm.
That's fucked up. Like, I mean, I understand that there are survivors, you know, that have, like, a hard time and stuff like that. But to say that topic is somehow taboo, that, like, we can't talk about it as a culture. I understand that you're trying to respect people who have been victimized. But we have to talk about it. Because, you know, especially when it comes to... the reason why we have to talk about it is because when it comes to those gray zones, people need to know black and white.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people need to understand. People need to understand the language of consent outside of the context of yes and no.
Right. Because technically, if you only speak in yes or no, she did not say yes, she did not say no. And I think that's very common in any given sexual situation, whether it's rape or not. There's a lot of times where neither party very specifically says yes or no. Or enthusiastically says yeah and, you know, uncomfortably says no or whatever. You know, a lot of times that's
which is why you should get a contract.
Oh my god, really? Contract?
Hey, if you want 50 Shades of fucked up, you can definitely sign that contract.
It's more like 50 Shades of, like, not delivering on anything.
50 Shades of getting smacked in the ass 6 times and then crying about it.
And that's the end of your movie.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So I personally think that there was no problem with them exploring this topic in a serious way or portraying this scene on the show, especially when you took it out of the extremely brutal context of the books.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just going to talk about it compared to the books, yeah, this was way tamer.
Not tamer, but at least not so harsh. Because seeing the scenes as they play out in the books would have been very, very disturbing.
Well, I mean, that wouldn't be legally allowed to show.
Yeah, you couldn't do that. But just to say, so I personally I have no problem with HBO filming this kind of scene and putting it in their show, especially if they do pursue this as an important plot point, which I think they will, but I don't know yet. So that's where I stand.
Yeah, and let's also point out the fact that the show is deviating from the books.
Oh, but at this point, a lot.
Yeah, at this point, the show is deviating from the books.
So we definitely can't even use the books as a guideline for where this plot will go.
Yeah, so, I mean, we don't know where this plot will go. I mean, we don't know if she's going to, you know, learn the ways that, like, Khaleesi did and then, like, take the situation into, you know, her own hands, like, whether that's going to be worked out, whether she's going to, like, work something else out.
It's mostly Sansa's character why I think that this is going to be taken seriously, is her character is all about what's happened to her family and her pain and terrible things that have happened to her and her trying to learn how to get through as best she can in this world and how to let's
not
find her own way.
Let's not forget the scene that took place almost directly before this scene, which is the scene where Miranda was bathing her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the scene I brought up. Yeah.
And it was definitely a scene where she took agency and said, no matter what you do, you can't scare me.
Right.
Which
she's prepared for what may come.
She knows this world enough to know what happens, which is not to say...
That's not to say that she is consenting to everything that's happening, or that she's happy with it or comfortable in any way, but she knows.
Yeah.
She's prepared, embraced herself, and I think this is going to be really played into her character and her storyline, and not something that's dismissed or not talked about ever again. Especially, I mean, people want to say, oh, you're making it all about Theon, but especially when you had a witness to the scene. There's no way the scene is just going to go away forever.
Yeah, and
I really don't think so, because nobody saw the other two scenes.
This might also be Theon's breaking point.
Right.
Within the context of the show, because this is a different experience than what happened in the books. So this might be a turning point for Theon.
Right.
You know, like, we don't know. This might have been when Theon finally broke out and actually became Theon again and not Reek.
Right. And maybe if it does turn out that the scene did go absolutely nowhere and was never talked about or related to anything again, maybe then I'll come back to the scene and be pissed at it then for being included, but right now I don't foresee it going that way. I don't think it's possible.
If you have an opinion on this, please voice it.
Yeah. Even if you disagree with us, definitely go ahead and say it anyway.
If you disagree with us, if you think I'm a horrible person because I view things a little bit differently on my first viewing and then talk it through, you know, if you somehow think that's wrong, you know, let me know. Yeah. Anyways, thanks for listening. We'll definitely talk about lighter subjects next time.
No, we're not, because next time it's going to be Mad Max, right? It's not exactly lighter.
Oh, well.
But it's definitely a lot more awesome.
Yeah,
It's more awesome. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. More awesome. More things are implied. Anyways, thanks for listening.